everybody. Welcome. It's an exciting day for these gentlemen, but on a somber note, I have to offer on behalf of our team our condolences to our caucus chair, the MLA for Riding Mountain, Greg Nesbitt, on the passing of his father. Greg, we're thinking of you. We're thinking of your many friends and family as well, and we offer our support and our thoughts and our prayers. We have a returning member that is very familiar to all of you, Ralph Eichler, who comes with tremendous background in the ag sector. It's not a new portfolio for Ralph, and I know he'll embrace the challenges very readily. His learning curve is going to be steep and not as necessarily challenging perhaps as the other two gentlemen I'll introduce shortly, but I want to say a special thanks to Ralph, to his family, for his longtime support to the people of Manitoba, and this portfolio is one that I think is especially important not only to Ralph and to us, but to the people of Manitoba. So thank you very much, Ralph, for taking on that challenge again. Dr. Alan Lagimodiere comes to us with a tremendous record of service, not just since his election to office, but long prior. He's an accomplished and successful business person, really in many respects, truly a self-made man. Strong Métis heritage, very proud Métis person. I know that his belief in reconciliation and the actions that we must take and have taken and will continue to take is a very important part of him taking on this new portfolio. And I say to Al, thank you very much. Al has faced, as some of our caucus members have, as all of us sometimes in our lives do, has faced some health challenges in his life, but he's a healthy guy now, vigorous and ready to go. And Al, thank you so much for taking on these challenges. Exciting time and an exciting opportunity for us in this time as Manitobans and as Canadians to move forward on reconciliation in a real way. And I look forward to Al's work on this file, as many of our other cabinet ministers are also going to be involved in partnering on aspects of this file with him. John Reyes is a proud Manitoban, a proud Filipino Manitoban, but he is a proud self-employed business person. That was his record before entering public life. He's also well known to Bomber fans as an official, and he has been a leader in the Filipino business community in many ways for many years prior to his entry into politics. Since his time in coming to elected office, John has served us as the military envoy, and he has built such a strong rapport with military people, military organizations, and all of us who support the work of our troops here and abroad. Appreciate John's work in many files. Each of these gentlemen has been a strong contributor to our team in government, in opposition prior to our time in government also, and I want to say thank you to them for taking on these challenging roles today. We're proud of you. If I could, I want to just briefly say congratulations to Arlen Dumas on recapturing his responsibilities as the Grand Chief. And also to those who put their names forward as alternatives. That's what democracy is about, and we thank them for doing that and wish them well, all of them well. I reached out to Arlen this morning. I expect he is deservedly resting yet because it's been a hard campaign, a long campaign for him, but I look forward to, and I know Al looks forward also to meeting with Arlen at the earliest opportunity. I have a cough call in a few minutes, but I would like to, if I could, just take a few questions, and then I think this day should be about these gentlemen. I hope that would suffice for today. I only say that Eileen Clark has been a tremendous contributor to our team in cabinet, also in opposition. I've known Eileen since we were both 21 years old. I'm not going to have a negative thing to say about Eileen Clark. I think that any suggestions or comments that she or anyone else has are heard on our team, and we continue to drive forward with an agenda for change and reform in areas that need agendas that are aggressive and ambitious. And we're going to I'm sorry, I was just trying to answer Steve's question, Tom. And I think it's very important we continue with that agenda together, and that's what we're going to be doing here, and I anticipate Eileen will play a role in that as we move forward.
But do you think those are legitimate comments?
I think that it's an emotional time right now, and I think it's a time of sadness for some, but happiness for others. So I'd like to focus today on the people that are going to be happy here as new appointees to our cabinet team, and Eileen and I will continue to have the relationship that we've had, which has been strong and supportive for a long, long time.
Did Ms. Clark and Mr. Peterson indicate that they're not running again in 2023?
Cabinet planning is one of the hardest challenges I think any premier or any prime minister faces. It's not made any less challenging by the abundance of talented people that we have in our caucus. We have, as you know, one of the largest representations of elected officials. I think probably it's tied for second in the history of the province of Manitoba. These gentlemen are indicative of the kind of talent and depth we have in our team. It's not easy to move people out of positions. It is easier to move them into positions. But I think we've maintained a balance. As our elected members have gained experience, we have expanded our cabinet size, but I think we've done it with thoughtfulness to focus on key issues. Mental health and wellness, a greater focus on targeted economic development are examples of that. So I can only say there's always a challenge in positioning people in an executive council in a way that meets their specifications, and I respect the right of. Look, I have discussions with all my caucus about their intentions, and I will not be making statements about anyone's intention to run at this point. I think those intentions to recontest a riding, those are decisions that they will make and they will announce at the appropriate time.
Ordinary Manitobans, they support what Ms. Clark did. They support what she has said about your cabinet and your leadership not being transparent. What do you say to those Manitobans, not your own caucus, not this building, but Manitobans who are supporting what she did?
Well, what I would say is read my comments from last week. This appears to be the firestorm you're referring to. So read my comments from last week. Read them thoughtfully. I paid tribute to Canadians. I paid tribute to pre-Canada builders. I spoke about people who came here with hope to build families and communities. I spoke with sincerity. I spoke genuinely. I did not reference colonialism. I did not reference Europeans in any way, shape, or form. I was talking about our First Peoples. I was talking about our Métis. I was talking about the people who came after them. And I was talking about building. And I'll keep talking about building because that's what we need to do. Manitoba will benefit from that more than any other province. And our record on outreach, which is included in your information you have today, a sample of some of a dozen or so initiatives that we've undertaken as a government, can be stacked up, if you would like to, against the records on outreach and on reconciliation of any other jurisdiction and compared. So I would encourage you to do that. This doesn't happen without a team of people dedicated to the cause. And so we'll continue to focus on these issues. Truly, we have made some progress, but there is much more work to do, and I am excited, and I know this team is excited to make that progress happen.
So they misinterpreted, we misinterpreted, everybody that's
No.
misinterpreted.
Well, what I'm asking you to do is to look at the interview, read the text, and ask yourself if the remarks are justified or not. You're objective journalists, so please do that.
Well, the lives of
Thousands of years ago, people came here as newcomers, thousands of years ago. We in Manitoba demonstrate partnerships. My wife comes from, I'm trying to answer your question, Tom. Sorry. Keep going, please. Of course, please continue.
That newcomers and their elected officials did destroy the lives of Aboriginal people when they came here to build Canada. How do you square that with your comment last week where you said that people came here and they didn't destroy it? How do you square those two?
I'm just making sure you're done your question, Tom. Okay. Read my comments. Indigenous people were the first Canadians. They were newcomers at that point in time. They forged a life by building. They worked diligently to do that for millennia. When subsequent immigrants came here, they couldn't have survived without the partnerships that were forged. My wife's family are Icelandic. The Icelandic people couldn't have survived in the Inner Lake without the partnership of Indigenous people and their support. Icelanders knew how to fish. They didn't know how to fish through the ice, for example. That is just one example of hundreds of examples. The Selkirk settlers couldn't have survived without the knowledge they obtained from Indigenous Canadians, not yet Canadians, but Manitobans, not yet Manitobans, but people who were Indigenous gave them shared knowledge, and that shared knowledge is how we achieve reconciliation. It's how we made progress to date. It's how we're going to go forward. My comments were directed towards encouraging that building to happen, that building that's been done for millennia by Indigenous Canadians, continued on and continues today. And it must continue from all of us working together. So the reactions indicate, I think, probably the emotion of the issue, most certainly, but also partly the challenge. That when anyone speaks on these issues, there is a danger that they'll be harshly criticized. And most certainly I recognize that. I've recognized that for a long time. I've been harshly criticized for pushing for Indigenous women's property rights 20 years ago. I was working on reconciliation and talked to fellow journalists or former journalists and asked them. Talk to Mia Rabson, talk to Mary Agnes Welsh, ask them if I was pushing hard on Indigenous issues 20 years ago, and they'll tell you absolutely he was, and I'm not going to stop. So I understand these are difficult and emotional issues and times we live in, but I think we have to seize the opportunity to move forward. We have to seize the opportunity to reach out with an open hand, not with a clenched fist. We can work together, and Manitoba has the chance to do that now. Don't read my comments with an open mind and ask yourself if it could not be interpreted to be more an invitation to build than a defense of anything colonial. I have not used that phrase or word. I see it in a headline today in a major paper. It's not what I'm about. It's not what I've been about. I can only say, consider the reality of the challenging times, consider the reality of the stresses of the responsibilities Eileen has performed and faced I think so well for half a decade. Consider those realities. Put things in context. I met Eileen when I started teaching in Gladstone. I know her well. I care deeply for her and for her family. I have tremendous respect for her. You won't get a negative comment from me about Eileen Clark, ever. Yes. Well, again, I expect that we're going to be undertaking to do measures that would be appropriate in the circumstance. These are sadly not new events. We know that, and so I'm going to leave it to the minister on his first day to tackle his portfolio, as I have, and we'll continue to do everything we can in our power to address these issues. They're issues. Some of these issues are of long standing, as you know, and they're not going to be solved overnight. But we need to keep working on them. I have a call with the premiers and prime minister later this afternoon, and these are I expect some of the issues we'll be touching on. I'll give someone else a chance. Sean, if you don't mind, I'll just give you someone else a chance. I don't mean to cut you off. I didn't mean to cut you off before, Tom.
From your comments last week on the first time that you talked to this type of a response to your views on Indigenous people, so I'm wondering, in your, what is it about the comments or your beliefs that prompts this sort of a reaction?
Well, the most recent criticism was on the shutting down of a pot store. I think that's the most recent one. I think it was misrepresented in an article in one of the papers today that I had criticized the federal government for supplying Indigenous communities with vaccines when the opposite was the case. Misrepresentation, factual misrepresentation in an article in a newspaper doesn't help anything. I actually made the case that Manitoba, with the highest number of Indigenous people and vulnerable people in the country, deserved an extra allocation of vaccines. I made the case that they should be addressing that issue federally, and they did, with 30,000 additional vaccines, and I thank them for that. But factual misrepresentations don't really help to support the arguments that are being made by some columnists.
The elephant in the room is that you're a leader that leads in isolation, and that you do not consult. As Clark alludes to this, a lot of people are saying, really, are you a consultative leader? Everybody in your caucus and Manitobans have a say in this government?
Well, you've created a contrary narrative, I suppose, in some respects with this case. But I suppose, it's the price of leadership to make decisions. And we're in a pandemic. And so there is no doubt that I've taken actions and I've made decisions because that is the responsibility I stood for office to fulfill. But there is also no doubt that we have a strong and very cohesive team in government, and that we are friends and we are loyal to one another, who held together as with all Manitobans, frankly, over the last year and a half, but before that, in opposition for a number of years. Everyone has their own style. I'm probably far less brusque and far more consultative than I was when I started in this job. I recognize that, but remember, I came into this job when no one else wanted it, when we had half as many MLAs, when we were dead broke, and when our ridings weren't well organized. And so I've tried to build our organization as a political party, and I've tried to do my best to pull a team together, and I'm proud of that team. And I'm today even prouder of it, because I think we have some incredible people, and I think you have 3 of them in front of you today, and you may not think 4, but that's fine. I'm fine with that. Again, I'm not going to talk to you about my conversations with my colleagues. That's something I haven't done, and I try not to do. I think we should respect the decisions. In this respect, I hope you respect mine. There's never an easy time to do these changes. We move from crisis to crisis, it seems. Yeah. So there's never an easy time. Well, again, we have these discussions, we make these decisions, and they're not easy decisions. Today we have introduced to you one returning member to a portfolio he's held before. I think he'll do a bang-up job, as he always has, and 2 new members of our cabinet that have worked very, very hard to earn that the right to be in executive council, and they are. So I congratulate them again, and I sincerely hope that we can make sure that this day is somewhat about the joy that they and their families deserve to feel today, and I know every one of their colleagues feels for them.
Thanks, Premier. Gotta go get the
Thanks, everybody, and sorry to run away, but it's got to happen.
All right, Minister Lagimodiere, come on up.
Well, I would just like to say how honored I am to be here on Treaty 1 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation. How proud I am that our Premier has found the will to ask me to take over a new department, Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations. And I want to say that I've got the utmost respect for everything that Eileen Clark has done in this office to move reconciliation forward. She has worked tirelessly to earn the respect and the trust of Indigenous people in Manitoba, and that's the next level for me, is to re-engage with everybody and earn their trust and respect in Manitoba, so we can work together and forge a better Manitoba. So. Well, for me, with my background in both business and in medicine, in my medical career, there are often times where I took over a case from another individual, and in business, taking over the management as well. And in those roles, I always found the most important aspect of that new position was reaching out to the outgoing individuals and to have that sit down talk with them and talk to them about the strengths of the department, the weaknesses, the opportunity, the threats that may be out there to us, and what do we need to do as a group, as cabinet ministers here in Manitoba now, to work together to build a bigger and stronger Manitoba for everyone. When it comes to comments in the media, I think it's important for the media to all understand, or try to understand, where the comments come from. You know, reach out to the individuals who made them, and to report fairly both sides of what's being reported out there. With that, I would like to say that, to me, there have been very strong comments made on both sides of the arguments here. We've had very compassionate statements made by leaders out there, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, throughout Canada. And if we talk about truth and reconciliation, one of the most important aspects of truth and reconciliation to me is that truth. It's getting down to finding out what exactly is the truth out there. I know my ancestors, my European ancestors, came here in the 1600s. There were already people living here. We assimilated with the Indigenous people. I became a member of the Métis Nation through that. They worked together to build a better and stronger. They did what they could. They're very Manitobans. The settlers who came and the Indigenous people are all very resilient, and they all continue to want to work together on reconciliation, which, you know, I want to move that forward as quickly and as efficiently as we can. Well, that's what I was saying. We need to look at all the comments that are made out there from all perspectives, and with that, it's about educating. Starting in our schools, to educate individuals about the importance of knowing our culture and where we came from as Manitobans, as Canadians. And only through that process of people asking those questions. So the Premier made some statements that got a lot of people thinking. I hope that it got them thinking. To ask themselves, where does that statement come from? Where was he going with that? And to hear his explanation today, it was to acknowledge that the individuals who came here to Canada were here to build a better Canada, to build a better Manitoba, which is where we want to be moving forward. I'm sorry. Well, residential schools, I had, being Indigenous, I heard the stories my entire life of the treatment of individuals in residential schools. And I think at one time in the 1900s, the federal government had actually hired a doctor to look at the situations in residential schools. His last name, I believe, was Bryce. And he did his reports and came back to the federal government and said, we have a very high death loss in our residential schools. And the reasons he pointed out were there was malnourishment in the schools, there was overcrowding in the schools, poor ventilation, TB in the schools, which accounted for a lot of problems in those residential schools, just the physical environment that the children were placed in. Would I want to see my children, my grandchildren, taken away from me and put into an institution? At the time, I believe they really did think that they were doing the right thing. In retrospect, we have to acknowledge what's happened in our past and do what we can to not only to acknowledge, but to recognize. And our government is doing more than our part with Truth and Reconciliation as calls to action. 94 calls to action through the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. And Manitoba has gone above and beyond those recommendations, and we will continue to move above and beyond those recommendations made by the Commission. Well, at the time, I think the intent was there that they thought they were doing the right thing. In retrospect, it's easy to judge in the past, but at the time, they really thought that they were doing the right thing. I'm saddened by the fact that it took so long for individuals to recognize that process wasn't working and it wasn't the right thing to do. From my knowledge of it, the residential school system was designed to take Indigenous children and give them the skills and abilities they would need to fit into society as it moved forward. So.
I am an honorary witness for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I listened to the stories of the survivors.
Yes.
And I cannot accept you saying what you just said about residential schools. It was the expressed intent of residential schools to kill the Indian in the child. It is not cultural relativism, it is not revisionist history for us to say that that was wrong. Any right-minded person at the time should have known that it was wrong. Many did know and speak up against it. And if you are to take your job that you've been appointed to by Mr. Pallister seriously, starting today, you have to change that thinking.
I look forward to working with you in the future as the leader of the opposition.
We'll give you a chance, but you can't be out here defending residential schools if you want to work with Indigenous communities. Killing the Indian in the child was wrong. That's what they talked about at the time when they were started, when they were run. We all know that that was wrong. So you have to move past that.
Right.
To tell you what he believes is what's what.
Yes.
We're at a climactic moment in our society here. How do you react to Mr. Kinew's interrupting your introduction?
It goes back to what I was saying about trying to get down to the truth as to different perspectives were held on both sides in history. And we, and you as reporters, need to do your jobs to get down and research as much as you can to find out what the truth was in those situations. And that's part of my job. To assimilate Indigenous people into the non-Indigenous culture. they didn't allow them to practice any of their cultural beliefs when they were in the Indigenous schools, which it's important that we recognize that that happened and do what we can to bring that culture back and to teach that in our schools today, that we need to acknowledge what happened in the past and work together to move beyond that as a team. I believe that he was trying to tell everybody that everybody that came to Canada was trying to work together for a better Canada. That's truly what he believes.
At anybody's expense? You think that was at anybody's expense? Build a better Canada for newcomers? Was that at the expense of Indigenous people that were here? Do you think?
Indigenous people did suffer because of what happened in the past. There's no doubt about that. And it's up to us now to acknowledge that and recognize that truth and say, what do we as Indigenous people now expect from a government moving forward? And how can we work together with that?
So what you're saying is that the media and Indigenous leadership and a significant number of Manitobans misunderstood Premier Pallister's comments. Is that correct?
Well, I often, I have an extensive background in education. And one of the problems that you have in education is you have a professor standing in front of you and he's giving you a lecture. Now, in order for me to understand that, I've got to encode what I think that professor is saying and put it into my mind. And then to answer a question on a test, I need to go back to that vault, decode it, and put it back into what I thought that individual was trying to say. And what I'm saying is it's important for everybody to try and understand all the aspects of the statements that are made. And if you don't understand, reach out to those individuals and say, I'm not really sure what you meant here.
So a significant number of people in Manitoba and the Indigenous leadership that have criticized Mr. Pallister's comment had to decode, as you said, what he said. But I still...
For themselves.
For themselves. I still will return to my question. You believe that those people misunderstood his comments, correct? Yes or no? They misunderstood him?
From what he said today, yes.
Thanks. That's it for Minister Lagimodiere.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be appointed the Minister of Economic Development and Jobs. I want to thank Premier Pallister. I also want to thank my predecessor, Mr. Ralph Eichler. I'm looking forward to this position as an entrepreneur myself, a former entrepreneur. I'm very excited to get our economy back on track for growth, but first recovery. So hopefully you get more vaccinations. That'll open our economy even more. So if there are any questions, here I am.
How do you assess the Edmonton finals so far? Pallister said that it's the best province in the world for COVID support, business leadership, otherwise. How do you think you guys have done so far?
Well, I believe that we've had some of the best business supports in all of Canada, and I think it's very important that we continue to do our outreach, as I have done locally as a local MLA in my area when this pandemic first happened. And I'm going to take it to a bigger level by continuing to communicate with the major stakeholders in our province. Yes. Mais je suis vraiment heureux et excité avec ce portfolio et je suis vraiment heureux de représenter mon province et j'ai servi mon pays dans le militaire et j'étais dans les affaires commerce avant ça. I was also in non-profits as well, as you know. Et je pense, comme une blague, vous savez que j'ai été un arbitre de football et j'ai développé de peau et paix pour être ici pour une carrière des politiques. So, je suis vraiment heureux d'être ici parce que avant une carrière dans les politiques, j'ai été le président du conseil des affaires des Filipinos. Et je connais les personnalités comme Mariette Muller at the World Trade Center et Chuck Davidson et Laura Millard. Je suis vraiment excité de travailler avec eux et toutes les autres personnes. I think the priorities will be, first of all, obviously recovery, because recovery means, getting our vaccination numbers up and communicating that with all Manitobans, I think every department, and that'll be opportunity for growth. But I'm ready to get to work. Minister Eichler is going to brief me on some things, and I understand we have a meeting later on this afternoon, and I'm very excited about that.
Minister, the ultimate expression of dissatisfaction with the job is to resign, especially when you're in public life. Ms. Clark did that, and she said in part because she felt her voice wasn't heard in cabinet. I'd like your reaction to those statements she made and expression of your confidence that your voice will be heard.
You know, Minister Clark and I, we've served when I was the envoy, and she did her file. She was assigned her file back in 2016. Actually, she pointed out when I saw her in Gladstone, I did a Legion tour last year, that John and I have actually been in these roles since we formed government, and I can honestly tell you that I have nothing but the utmost respect for Eileen, and all I can say is she's first class, and I think very highly of her, and I always will.
Support Premier's comments that have become controversial. Do you believe that people misread, misinterpreted, or got it wrong?
I think as politicians, and just by also by being objective, when you hear comments that are made by politicians, it's very important to be objective of it, and people are going to form their own opinions. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, merci.
Get my hearing aids back in. These masks are a bit problematic for people that wear hearing aids, but.
I got a light to load for a minute. You still making ice cream in your office?
How did you know? Did you not get the invite? Oh, well, I'm sure you do. I make the best ice cream in the country. I started off in ag, but. Well, that's a little early, don't you think? The election's a long time away. I hope I'm still alive by then. I'm getting up in age, but I love to serve. I was retired once, as you know, and came out of retirement to run. So I got intentions to go nowhere. That's a job I love and have passion. I love serving the people.
You got a lot of experience around this building and the province. What do you think about controversies surrounding Premier's comments? First of all, do you support?
Absolutely, I support the Premier in all his decisions. He's our leader. He's our coach. Sometimes it can get misinterpreted, which I think you've asked a number of us. You've responded to Minister Clark's comments. And I have to say that I do strongly believe that it probably could have been said in a different way, but the intent has been very clear here. That is not what has been represented by his comments, and I stand by him on those comments. Can you speak up a bit, Jeff? Okay. Well, let's back up the bus a little bit. Jeff, as you know, I started off during BSE. A lot of us, Tom, I think, probably was around by then. Steve was around by then. And we didn't know how we'd handle it either. So even being in opposition, I felt I did an awful good job. We joined the New West Partnership, or the Midwest Partnership, and worked with our cousins to the south to get the border reopened. The same thing's going to happen here. Farming is always in a crisis. Too much rain, not enough rain. We got droughts in certain parts of the province, droughts in other parts. but we're always going to have a crisis in agriculture. So how do we respond to those needs? You build programs according to what the problem is. So we did that with BSE. We did that during the previous drought. If you remember in 2004, we actually knocked trees down to feed our cattle. There's not many trees left anymore, but there's not many cattle left either. But certainly that's another issue. We will build programs to make sure our farmers are there to be sustained short and long term. I'm looking forward to working with the municipalities. Some have already passed resolutions. If you go back 2 years ago, same thing happened then. We had a bit of a drought, and not all parts of the province, but mainly the interlake country. So we'll respond to the needs of those farmers in a timely manner. Okay, thank you. I'll bite him one time. All right.